So today's video I wanted to make in honor of Pride Month. And that is why I decided to make a full video all about the LGBTQ+ community and their influence on music, especially in the 60s and 70s. So I'm gonna tell you about the most famous rock stars of the 60s and 70s that were involved with the LGBTQ+ movement, and how certain genres of rock music were a safe space to gays, lesbians and trans people back in the 60s and 70s. So I got my notebook right here. I made a ton of notes because I'm trying to not leave out any musicians or events, but there is a high chance that this video isn't gonna cover absolutely everything. So if you have any more knowledge about the LGBTQ+ community and them being involved with rock music in the 60s and 70s, please feel free to leave a comment down below and share your knowledge with all of us. I also got myself a nice coffee in this glass that I just thrifted and I absolutely love, because this video is gonna take a while. So I would recommend you to get a snack, get a drink, sit back and relax, and let me tell you a bit about rock music and the LGBTQ+ community in the 60s and 70s. So to talk about queer music in the 60s and 70s, we kind of have to go back in time to the late 19th century. So around 1819, music and film recording was invented. And that meant that even smaller artists could reach a larger audience with their music. However, conservative bans limited what kind of music could be produced. So in the 30s and 40s, being homosexual was a crime in pretty much all countries. So there really was no music released about homosexuality or made by queer people. So fueled by the post-World War II Lavender Scare, which basically was a made-up fear of homosexuals, music with LGBTQ+ themes wouldn't be produced or released by anyone. And so that kind of music really didn't have an audience, or at least wouldn't be reproduced for a larger audience. And it kind of stayed the same until the gay rights liberation in the 1960s. So the fact that homosexuality was still a crime in so many countries and that a lot of queer people were attacked on the street led to what is called the homophile era. And basically for the first time in history, queer people demanded equality. So in the 1960s, scientific studies proved that homosexuality in fact wasn't a psychiatric disorder, and in 1973 there was finally put an end to putting LGBT people into mental asylums. So while that was happening in America, homosexuality was decriminalized in 1967 in England. So I feel like one of the most important events of LGBTQ+ liberation and the whole movement basically was Stonewall. If you've never heard of the Stonewall riot, please research it yourself, because I'm just gonna quickly touch on it, but it's such a big and interesting topic and it's really inspiring. So if you're interested in learning more about it, just research it. There are tons of amazing videos on YouTube. There are a lot of amazing and great researched articles about it. So if you're interested in the whole topic, I highly recommend you to read into Stonewall. But to kind of sum up what happened, so the Stonewall Inn was a gay bar in New York, and in the night of June 28th in 1969, the police raided the bar. For a lot of gay people in New York, the Stonewall Inn was a safe space where they could be, where they could hold hands, where gay people could kiss, and no one cared because it was in fact a safe space. So while the police was raiding a bar, a large group of people that were either part of the LGBTQ+ community or supporters of the community gathered around the Stonewall Inn, and when the police asked them to leave, it turned into a riot. That riot lasted 3 whole nights and eventually became a movement. So if you've seen my video on the counterculture, you know that the 60s were a time of riots, with people of color and women demanding their rights, and a lot of people protesting against the Vietnam War. Also back in the 60s, a lot of trans people were often targeted by the police because of their visibility, and 2 of the most famous trans women were Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Both of them were there the night of the Stonewall Inn. And there's actually an interview with Marsha P. Johnson where she said that when the riot started, she felt like she really had nothing to lose. So I feel like that is what made the Stonewall riot so big. That basically people were so fed up with being discriminated against the whole time that they thought they had nothing to lose, and that is why they finally stood up for themselves. So even though Stonewall was a big step for the queer movement, even post-Stonewall generations such as David Bowie, who at the time was a married man with a little kid, only used subplots to talk about his homosexuality in his songs. So one of the first musicians to actually come out in 1970 was Dusty Springfield. She's really well known for her amazing voice. She made a lot of records like this one, which is Son of a Preacher's Man. I feel like that's one of her most famous songs. However, her entire career she never sang a single song about her love for women. And pretty much the same goes for another amazing singer of the 1960s, Leslie Gore. So there are really few people who were openly gay in the 60s, because in fact it was a crime in so many countries. But one of the people who was at least kind of open about it was Brian Epstein. He's often referred to as the fifth Beatle because he was the manager of the Beatles. He tragically died of a drug overdose in 1967, and a lot of people say that that is because he was so stuck and desperate because of his sexuality. Looking back at that, I feel like it's so messed up that people were so desperate because they weren't allowed to love whoever they want, that they turned to drugs and later died so young and so fatal. So the late 60s hippie movement and the whole counterculture, led by the idea of peace and love, was really accepting and a safe space for a lot of people in the LGBTQ+ community. Singer Janis Joplin, for example, was really open about being bisexual, and she even brought her girlfriend to Woodstock. I think it's also important to note that a lot of 60s musicians were rumored to be homosexuals, such as members of the Rolling Stones or the Beatles, or pretty much everyone who didn't fit in with classic society standards. However, while being gay wasn't a topic often discussed by artists in the 60s, in the 70s, the LGBTQ+ community voiced their experiences through rock music. In the early 70s, glam rock emerged, and it really was a new era for rock music. Pioneered by artists like Lou Reed and David Bowie, glam rock played with gender roles. So men started to wear makeup and be more feminine with their outfits and dance on stage and wear really tight looks and really short pants, and really started to challenge gender norms. So glam rock essentially approached gender and sexuality as something fluid and performative. Nothing was assumed, and that is why glam rock was a safe space for so many people in the LGBTQ+ community. And that was basically a big difference to most musicians in the 60s. So for example, looking at the early Beatles, how all of them wore suits and they looked really put together, and now 10 years later you got people like David Bowie, Lou Reed, Mark Bolan, all dressed up in glam, wearing makeup and really challenging gender norms. Glam popularized gay fashion, bringing it to the forefront of society. Despite its obvious campness in both lyrics and dress, glam was popular with the majority of the audience. After a series of raids of gay bars in the mid-70s in London, Tom Robinson wrote his song Glad to be Gay. So as a survivor of one of these riots, Tom Robinson highlighted the systematic struggles most LGBTQ+ people faced within their daily lives. So even though at the time a lot of people really weren't supporting gay liberation, the song made it to the top 20. Soon other popular recording artists brought light to trans experiences, such as the Kings with their song Lola, or Lou Reed with his song Take a Walk on the Wild Side. Reed also discussed his personal experiences with being gay in his song Kill Your Son. So in the song he basically describes how he was forced to undergo an electroshock therapy as a teenager to discourage his homosexual desires. Both Lola and Take a Walk on the Wild Side made it to the top of the charts and stayed there for quite a while. However, glam wasn't nearly as successful in the US as it was in England. Being one of the most successful recording artists of the 1970s, Elton John's career in the US came to a halt after he came out as bisexual in an interview with the Rolling Stones in 1976. And after that interview was published, the Rolling Stone magazine got a lot of really nasty letters of people calling Elton John a pervert, and his album sales went significantly down. Furthermore, the band Queen came under fire for their music video to I Want to Break Free. So in the video, Freddie Mercury, Roger Taylor, Brian May and John Deacon are dressed up in drag as women. And a lot of people saw this as Freddie Mercury's coming out, which then led to people throwing rocks at the stage at a concert in Brazil. Although glam was a safe space for queer people in the rock community, it also opened up straight people to the idea of queer music and kind of raised awareness for LGBTQ+ people. So with the turn of the decade, punk would emerge as a new genre of music. It rejected fashion and conformity in both style and technique, and they found a large audience in the LGBTQ+ community. So the punk subculture was very political, and a lot of people saw them as outlaws. So basically a lot of gay clubs provided punk musicians an audience, and they let them play at their clubs, and the punk concerts were a new source of income for those gay bars. So by the early 80s, AIDS had been affecting a lot of gay communities in America and England, and pretty pretty much worldwide, with more than 5,500 people dying from AIDS in the US by 1985, and AIDS really started to spread super fast and worldwide, and especially among the gay communities. So neither the British nor the American government did anything to help those infected, and even spread misinformation about AIDS to demonize homosexuality again. So during those times, some artists spoke out about being HIV positive or having AIDS, while other people like Freddie Mercury weren't really that open about it. So Freddie Mercury was afraid to become the poster child of AIDS, and that is why he didn't really make it public that he was suffering from AIDS. However, his death in 1991 raised awareness for AIDS. And with 72,000 people coming to his tribute concert held at Wembley Stadium, millions of pounds were donated to the AIDS research. So I feel like in conclusion, it's safe to say that many musicians and artists helped the LGBTQ+ movement with encouraging people to live their lives and to be true to themselves and to stand up for their rights, and not only providing safe spaces with their music and their concert, but also giving those people a voice. So I feel like since then we've come a long way, but there is still a lot of work to do. And I think one of the best ways to support the LGBTQ+ community is by raising awareness, and that is why I really wanted to make this video. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. I really hope you could learn something. Please feel free to leave a comment down below and talk to me about the topic, because I am really interested in it. And as said, I think it's just important to talk about these things, to work out all the inequality, and to just really raise awareness and be an ally for the LGBTQ+ community. So I'm gonna link a Spotify playlist down below that I made filled with queer songs from the 60s and 70s made by gay, lesbian, and trans artists, or discussing queer experiences in the 60s and 70s. So if you want to listen to that, check out the link in my description box. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I would love you to give it a thumbs up and maybe even share it with a friend. I think it's important to raise awareness for the LGBTQ+ community, and if you have friends who are interested in rock music and you kind of want to teach them a bit about queer history, just feel free to send them this video. If you're interested in all things 60s and 70s, such as the music, the people, the fashion, the makeup, you're completely right on this channel. So hit the subscribe button down below if you don't want to miss out weekly videos all about that, because I would love to have you around as a subscriber. So I hope you have an amazing day. Go out, enjoy the sunshine, take yourself some time to focus on you and your mental health today, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye guys!